So far we've completed the first 3 increments of our game. Increment number 1, remember, was setting it up so that the monkey can move left and right based on arrow keys. Increment number 2 was making it so the bananas fall, and increment 3 was making it so that I can catch the bananas, and when I do, I both get a point. So here we go from 1 point to 2 points, and now the bananas jump to the top to a random location and keep falling. Well, what we want to add in this 4th increment is the idea of missing the bananas, and what happens if I'm hanging out over here and the bananas reach the ground like that. Now, long term, we might want to make the action that happens when they hit the ground a little more fancy, right? Long term, we might want to add in the idea of a couple of lives, and when you miss the bananas, you subtract 1 life, but as long as you still have lives left, you get to keep playing the game. And that's all good, but that's a little more complicated than we want for just a standard increment. Let's just look in this next increment at how we would worry about the bananas hitting the ground. And if the bananas hit the ground, game over, right? That's it for now. And that's just a small increment. And again, in incremental development, we want to encourage that idea. So what do we mean by the bananas hitting the ground, right? Well, there's a couple of things you might look at with this, but it turns out that I think that the easiest way is to do something that's different from what you've seen so far. So far, what you've seen in most of the programs you looked at in the task for this module was looking at color. We went in and used sensing, and we asked if the bananas are touching a particular color. You saw this in the maze. The bees were looking for a color of the finish line, and then the game was over. In the Pong game, there was a red line across the bottom, and if the ball ended up touching that color of that red line, then the game was over. And that's okay. Scratch does that a lot. I actually think that for this particular game, there's an easier way to do it, or maybe not easier, but I think better. And that's the idea of paying attention to where these bananas are, right? As long as the bananas are up in the air, right? So here's the banana right now. Remember that we can look over here and see where the bananas are. This is a Y value of 87, and as the bananas fall, that Y value gets smaller and smaller. Eventually it becomes a negative number. And so we could actually look at this Y value and say, hey, negative 55? That's fine. The bananas are still in the air. And eventually down here at the bottom, right, maybe negative 140 is sort of the bottom of that screen. As long as Y is greater than negative 140, the bananas are in the air. But as soon as it gets equal or below 140, the game is over. The bananas have touched the ground. And so we might want to ask that question. And so we want to know, how can we ask where the bananas are? Well, you may recall, some of you, from Module 1, when we were looking at the motion menu, and I asked you to explore in the task for the motion menu, you were looking at these blocks, and you connected together a bunch of these. And you may have noticed there's some round pegs at the bottom, which in Module 1, I didn't go into what these did, because it didn't fit into what we were doing. But notice that these are round pegs that would fit in round holes, and I can actually ask the computer, what is the X position of my banana? What is the Y position of my banana? It's the Y position I'm interested in. I want to know if the Y position of my value, or of my bananas, excuse me, dropped below, when Y position drops below negative 140. Right? When it does, then for the time being, the game is going to be over. So let's do this. I'm going to go out and grab an if statement. We say if the Y value is below 140, let's say game over for 2 seconds, and let's then end the game. And you remember this from the task at the beginning of the module. There's a stop all block in here that will say, let's stop all the programs running. And so where does this go? Well, really, we want to just ask it as a secondary question in my forever loop, right? As my loop runs, I want the bananas to drop by 1. I want to see if they're touching the monkey. If they are, handle it. If they're either way, right, then ask a separate question that says, are you still in the air? Or in this case, are you not still in the air? If you're not still in the air, then say game over and stop. And so that's really it for this increment, right? I can catch the bananas, no problem. It still behaves properly as I run around trying to catch the bananas. Right, let me catch it one more time. We'll get 3 points. And then after this, I'll go ahead and purposefully miss it, right? It's saying change by 1, change by -1, change by 1. Are you touching the monkey? No. Are you touching the monkey? No. Are you in the air? No. Or yes. But now here we finally said y position became less than 140. See, it's negative 141 here. So negative 141 is less than negative 140. So we say game over and stop the game. And that's our fourth increment. That's how we get the bananas touching the ground.